Now on.
Live from the Vodafone Gigabit Broadband Studio in Waterford and Dungarvan, this is Waterford at 1 News.
Good afternoon, I'm Sinead Aherne. Today's top stories: developments on capital projects at University Hospital Waterford, and investigations continuing into the death of a 26-year-old man at a pier on Aherne, Ireland. Plans to build a Viking village at the old sorting office site in Waterford City. And in sport, the Republic of Ireland will look to secure automatic qualification for Euro 2020 tonight. A Waterford TD says there's positive news about capital projects at University Hospital Waterford. Local Oireachtas members met with hospital management and representatives from the South West Hospital Group this morning. Sinn Féin's David Culnan says there's movement in relation to the mortuary and the second cath lab.
The mortuary has been given approval now in terms of the contract. It's hoped that will be signed in early December, with the start of works in early January, the commencement of works, and I think that's a big step forward. The planning application for the second cath lab has been already lodged. We're now working on the tendering side of it, and hopefully again next year we'll see start of works on the second cath lab, which will be huge in terms of advancing cardiac services.
He says there's also works taking place in the hospital theatres.
There is the new ophthalmology cataract theatre, which was in the capital plan. That's at design stage at the moment, and hopefully when that's built, that will mean that people who need cataract treatment, who are travelling to Dublin and Belfast and elsewhere at the moment, won't have to do so, that they can be treated in Waterford, and I think that will be a massive step forward. There's also upgrading of theatres in the hospital that are part of capital works and fire safety works as well. So there's a lot of capital investment being made. The big standout issues obviously are the mortuary and the second cath lab.
A Fine Gael election candidate has apologised after comments about asylum seekers. Verona Murphy said asylum seekers may need to be deprogrammed before coming here, as some may have been infiltrated by ISIS. Our political correspondent Sean Defoe has more.
In a radio interview at the weekend, Verona Murphy said there are issues with direct provision and said protests in Uachtarard and Galway against a planned direct provision centre there were justified as not enough information was given to locals. The Wexford by-election candidate said some asylum seekers may need to be deprogrammed after being infiltrated by ISIS. She's since apologised, saying they were a poor choice of words. Murphy said the point she was trying to make was that services need to be provided to people fleeing this country from difficult circumstances. She's come under criticism for the comments, with less than 2 weeks left until polling day.
An investigation's continuing into the death of a 26-year-old man at a pier on Aherne Island off the coast of County Donegal. Lee Early died in the early hours of yesterday morning when his car slipped off the pier into the sea. A passenger in the car managed to escape and raise the alarm. Mr Early worked as a skipper on a local boat and volunteered with the Orna Lai. Fianna Fáil councillor Noreen McGarvey explains how the tragedy happened.
We were just so shocked to hear that the horrendous, more or less freak accident had occurred, where two young men were involved in an accident where the car had somehow slipped off the pier into the water. The passenger managed to escape, however the driver was trapped and he was unable to get out of the car, and subsequently that was 26-year-old Lee Early, and by the time they got him out from the water he had died.
An ex-priest charged with possessing child pornography is due to appear before Waterford District Court tomorrow. 74-year-old Oliver O'Grady was brought before Dublin District Court on Saturday following his extradition from Portugal. He was arrested under European arrest warrant in the Algarve last month and held by authorities before being sent back to Ireland. It's alleged the video was in his possession at an address in County Waterford on a date in 2015. The offence can carry a sentence of up to 5 years. A Waterford woman has hit out at Danny Healy-Rae's calls for a drink driving permit. The Kerry TD last week claimed that driving on rural roads after a couple of pints was safe and should be permitted. Christina Donnelly, whose son Brendan was killed by a drunk driver in 2009, was speaking yesterday at World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. She says Deputy Healy-Rae's comments are insulting.
I'm used to hearing Danny Healy-Rae come out with these preposterous comments with regards to road deaths, and particularly I've always openly said with regards to rural isolation, he uses this adamantly as an excuse. He thinks he's fighting the right cause by promoting people to be able to drink and get in behind the wheel of a car and drive. His comment recently, I am absolutely shocked. If he spent one day in the home and the company of a family who have lost somebody to a road death, he would not be able to find a pair of shoes to fit him. I mean, he's an absolute insult.
AA Ireland says we don't need new speeding laws. The Transport Minister Shane Ross has asked the Cabinet to approve plans to introduce graduated speeding penalties. The proposals would start at a €60 fine and 2 penalty points for going 10 kilometres an hour over the limit. Drivers caught speeding by more than 30 kilometres would face a €2,000 fine. Director of Consumer Affairs for AA Ireland, Conor Faulkner, says our current laws are robust.
We actually have road safety law in our statute books that's very, very strong as anybody's in the world. We need to enforce it properly, we need to administer it properly, and really that's where government efforts should be concentrated. It's always relatively easy to think up a new law, eye-catching, it does the round in the media, it makes for great sound bites. But in terms of what we actually need, I'm not convinced we need new laws.
The director of Waterford Museum of Treasures says that Waterford Council's applied for funding to build a Viking centre on a site in Kaiser Street in the city. Speaking to Damien Tiernan on Daisha Today, Eamon McEnany said the council's made an application to Fáilte Ireland. The centre would recreate a Viking village for tourists at the old sorting office. Eamon McEnany says the decision on an application is expected this month.
I know way back in 2007 when we came up with the concept of the Viking Triangle, we had this great idea to build a big Viking centre. I know the council now has applied for money to do something like that, and we're waiting to hear from Fáilte Ireland that to make a bigger Viking centre, which maybe like recreate part of a village. The council owns that site called the sorting office site. It's on Kaiser Street, which literally where the site begins there. It's a great site, and it's literally where the Vikings were.
And the HSE is warning people to be aware of the dangers of taking unprescribed antibiotics. The message is being highlighted on European Antibiotic Awareness Day today. Josh Crosby reports.
The aim of this appeal being made is to prevent people from getting sick. The HSE says 1 in 10 patients will have a side effect of the medication, and in some cases antibiotics can cause serious illness. Its national lead for antimicrobial resistance, Professor Martin Cormacan, explains what people can sometimes experience.
They can cause skin rash, they can cause diarrhoea, they cause thrush, and those would be fairly common side effects of antibiotics, and they also upset the balance of your normal bugs.
A report published today by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control found that Ireland is the 3rd worst country in the EU for prescribing antibiotics, for the reason it took less time than for doctors to have to explain why a patient did not need them. This is something Stephen McMahon from the Irish Patients Association says needs to be addressed.
It's probably another symptom of the pressures that family doctors are finding themselves under with the workloads that they have to work under.
Professor Cormacan says it is a problem.
There is an issue that doctors sometimes feel under pressure because they're afraid that they might make a mistake.
The advice by the HSE is to only take antibiotics exactly as they are prescribed.
WLR Sport.
First to soccer, where Republic of Ireland manager Mick McCarthy has trimmed his squad down to his match day 23 ahead of tonight's must-win Euro 2020 qualifier against Denmark at the Aviva. 4 days on from a senior debut against New Zealand, teenage striker Troy Parrott has made the cut, as has Shamrock Rovers midfielder Jack Byrne. McCarthy has left winger Callum O'Dowda and striker Scott Hogan out of his squad for the game that kicks off at 7:45. Ireland know that victory will secure their place at the Euro 2020 finals, but anything less will see them heading for the playoffs next March. Shane Duffy will captain the side in the absence of the suspended Seamus Coleman. Mick McCarthy says the Brighton centre-back is a natural leader.
He's one of them in the squad that everybody so looks up to. He's one of those that just how he plays the game, I think he gets respect out of people and about his teammates, and without going around screaming and shout at people, he'll cajole people, he'll get people. He makes people, you can see him if we're having a bit of a tough time, he rallies the troops and gets them defending, and he's the one that blocks things and gets his head on stuff. He's one of those guys that you rely upon.
To Gaelic Games, where a former Waterford All-Star says you don't win Munster club games very often. Dan Shanahan coaches St Mary's, who've booked their spot in the Munster Hurling Junior Club semi-final. They'll face Carrickdavans in Clonmel next Saturday after beating Castletown Ballyagran by 3-10 to 14 points over the weekend. Dan was proud to be part of a famous day for the club.
Playing a massive team next week. I know that I think they're the favourites to win it out. But look, we'll cross that bridge next Saturday when we come to it. And if the boys enjoy the victory, you don't win Munster club games very often, and that's what I said inside before this. Whenever will they have a chance to again to win a Munster club game, and by God, they took it there in the second half.
To Camogie, the Waterford minor manager says their Munster victory is another positive step for Camogie and Waterford. Kevin Barry's side lifted the Munster A Shield in Capamore yesterday after a 2-13 to 11 points victory over Clare. He says all of Waterford's camogie teams are performing well.
We have the county team competing well at Sinead this year, and Fergal O'Brien coming in will add to that again, and Donald really put camogie on the map at Sinead level, and guys here winning club Munster titles, so I mean it's onwards and upwards hopefully, Matt, keep the push on and keep the work going,
In golf, Waterford's Robin Dawson's in action in the fourth round of the European Tour qualifying school. The Tramore golfer has dropped 2 shots to go to level par and is 3 shots outside the projected cut for the final 2 rounds in Spain. While in rugby, Munster have confirmed the club will bid farewell to scrum half Albie Mathewson at Thomond Park this weekend as the Kiwi gets set to leave the club. Mathewson joined on a short-term deal last season before he's retained as cover while Conor Murray was away at the World Cup in Japan. The 4-cap All Blacks played 27 times for the province and is expected to line out for the final time this Saturday against Racing 92 at Thomond Park. That's the latest on WLR. Our next bulletin.